The courtroom was cold and smelled faintly of old paper and coffee. It was packed full, reporters, angry townspeople, curious onlookers. Everyone squeezed into the wooden benches, whispering and shifting restlessly. The judge, a tall, stern-looking woman in her 50s named Judge Martha Reynolds, slammed her gavel once to silence the room. "Bring in the defendant," she ordered sharply. The heavy wooden doors creaked open. In shuffled a man wearing tattered jeans, dusty brown boots, and a threadbare army green jacket that hung from his shoulders like a heavy burden. His hair was messy, his face unshaven, but it was his eyes that caught everyone's attention. They were hollow, tired, and full of something much deeper than sadness. They held war stories, battles lost and won, sacrifices made, and forgotten. The bailiff roughly nudged him forward. "This court recognizes the case of State of Georgia versus Samuel J. Carter," the clerk read loudly, his voice echoing across the silent room. At that moment, everything changed. Judge Reynolds, seated high atop her bench, froze mid-motion. Her hand, which was reaching for a document, trembled. Her sharp brown eyes widened as if she'd seen a ghost. The gavel clattered from her hand, bouncing loudly on the wooden floor. Whispers erupted in the courtroom. What was happening? The bailiff looked confused. The lawyers turned to stare at the judge. Even the grumpy clerk stopped mid-sentence. Judge Reynolds slowly stood up, gripping the sides of her podium to steady herself. Her mouth opened but no words came out for several long, heavy seconds. Finally, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, she said, "Samuel J. Carter?" The abandoned veteran looked up, his tired eyes meeting hers for the first time. And in that instant it was like time itself stopped. Tears welled up in Judge Reynolds' eyes. She dropped her papers. She stumbled down from her bench, stepping quickly toward him, her heels clicking wildly on the floor. Gasps filled the courtroom. Who was he? Why was the judge reacting like this? Why was she crying? Before anyone could react, Judge Reynolds did something no one had ever seen in that courtroom. She dropped to her knees in front of the scruffy man, and saluted him. The courtroom exploded into chaos. The lawyers stood up, reporters grabbed their cameras, flashes blinding the room in a storm of lights. People shouted. Some cried. Some tried to understand what was happening. And Samuel? He just stood there, confused, broken, and lost. Judge Reynolds whispered, still kneeling, It's truly you. After all these years." The bailiff tried to pull her up, but she shook him off. The whole courtroom leaned forward in stunned silence as Judge Reynolds choked out through tears, "This man saved my life." The courtroom was frozen in time. Judge Reynolds remained on her knees, tears streaming down her face, staring up at Samuel J. Carter like he was a ghost resurrected from a past she had buried deep. The bailiff didn't dare move again. Even the reporters, hungry for a scandal, lowered their cameras, sensing something bigger was unfolding. Samuel stood stiff, confused, blinking like he had just walked into a world he didn't recognize. The judge finally stood, her knees shaking, and faced the courtroom. "Clear the room," she ordered hoarsely. "But, Your Honor," one of the attorneys started. "I said clear the room." Judge Reynolds barked, slamming her hand against her bench. Scrambling, the crowd stumbled over itself to leave. Some reporters tried to protest, but the bailiff and court officers quickly ushered everyone out, leaving only Samuel, Judge Reynolds, 2 guards, and a very nervous young clerk. Once the doors closed with a heavy thud, the courtroom grew deathly silent. Judge Reynolds wiped her tears and straightened her robes. She motioned Samuel toward the witness stand, but he didn't move. I don't understand," Samuel croaked. His voice was gravelly, like someone who hadn't spoken much in years. The judge nodded solemnly. "You wouldn't? How could you?" She took a deep breath, steadying herself, and said, 25 years ago, there was a firefight in Kandahar. I was a young army nurse. Our unit got ambushed. We lost half our team. I was hit, trapped under rubble." She paused, swallowing hard. "I thought I was going to die." Samuel's brow furrowed. He tilted his head slightly, trying to reach into the dark corners of his mind where those memories lived. Judge Reynolds continued, "A soldier, a young private, dug through debris with his bare hands. He dragged me out. I was barely alive. He carried me 3 miles under enemy fire. He refused to leave me even when ordered to retreat. He almost died himself." She stepped closer, her hands trembling. "That soldier," she whispered, pointing at Samuel, "was you." Samuel staggered back a step like she had physically struck him. "No," he said, his voice breaking. "That can't be. I don't remember." Judge Reynolds shook her head. "You wouldn't? You were unconscious when reinforcements finally found us. They said you went into shock. Severe trauma. Then you disappeared. Tears welled in Samuel's eyes, but he blinked them away stubbornly. I didn't vanish, he rasped. They threw me away. The judge frowned deeply. What do you mean? Samuel laughed bitterly. After I woke up, they said I was broken. PTSD. Head injury. Unfit for service. They discharged me, no ceremony. No thanks. Just a paper and a shove out the door. I had no family. No home to go back to. So I just drifted. He looked around the empty courtroom with a hollow, haunted gaze. America forgot me. The words hung in the air, heavy and painful. Judge Reynolds' lips quivered. She turned to the clerk and the guards. Leave us. Now. They hesitated but obeyed. Soon, only she and Samuel remained in the cavernous courtroom. Slowly, cautiously, Judge Reynolds approached Samuel. She stopped just a foot away and said in a choked voice, I didn't forget. I owe you my life. And I will not let you stand here abandoned again. Samuel opened his mouth to protest, to say he didn't need pity, but Judge Reynolds raised a hand. You were arrested for trespassing on government property, she said quietly. But what the arrest report doesn't say is that the government property was a veterans memorial park. You were sleeping beside a monument. Samuel looked away ashamed. I had nowhere else to go, he muttered. Judge Reynolds' face hardened. No more. Before Samuel could react, she grabbed the gavel and slammed it down hard. This court finds Samuel J. Carter not guilty, she declared. Samuel blinked, stunned. But I... You are not a criminal, she said fiercely. You are a hero. Just then the double doors burst open. A man in a sharp navy blue suit with silver hair and a row of military medals pinned to his chest stormed into the courtroom, flanked by 2 uniformed soldiers. Samuel flinched instinctively, his battered mind ready for another fight. The man barked out, Where is he? Judge Reynolds smiled through her tears. He's right here, General. Samuel started, utterly lost. The general marched up to Samuel, standing stiffly at attention. And then, in a move that left Samuel and everyone else speechless, the general snapped a salute and said loudly, Private First Class Samuel J. Carter, you are hereby reinstated and honored for your service. Samuel's mouth dropped open. The courtroom lights seemed to shine brighter. For the first time in decades, Samuel felt seen, felt remembered. But before he could even react, the general added, And you're coming with us. Right now. Samuel looked at Judge Reynolds, confused and overwhelmed. Coming where? The general smiled warmly and said, Home. Samuel stood frozen, the words echoing in his mind like a drumbeat. Coming home? For a man who hadn't called any place home in nearly 30 years, the idea was so foreign it felt almost cruel. He blinked up at the general, then at Judge Reynolds, searching their faces for some sign, some proof, that this wasn't another bad dream or cruel joke. The general, whose name tag read Briggs, clapped a strong, warm hand on Samuel's bony shoulder. You saved one of our own, General Briggs said. And we're here to make sure you're never abandoned again. Samuel didn't move. He wasn't used to people touching him kindly. He wasn't used to kindness at all. You don't have to go if you don't want to, Judge Reynolds said softly, sensing his hesitation. But if you come with us, you'll have a place to sleep. Real meals. Medical help. People who care. Samuel swallowed hard. His throat burned with emotions he couldn't name. Finally, with a slow, cautious nod, he whispered, Okay. The general smiled proudly as if Samuel had just won a battle. Let's go then, General Briggs said, guiding him gently toward the doors. As they stepped outside, the bright Georgia sun hit Samuel's face. It was warmer than he remembered. The air smelled of freedom, and something sweeter he couldn't quite place, hope. 2 black SUVs waited at the curb, military plates gleaming. A few reporters, having hung around, snapped photos frantically as Samuel was escorted into one of the vehicles. Hey, what's going on? Someone shouted. Is he a hero or a criminal? Where are they taking him? But no one answered. Inside the SUV, Samuel stared out the window as the city passed by, all glass towers and busy streets, so different from the dirt roads and small towns he remembered. General Briggs leaned forward from the front passenger seat. We're taking you to Freedom Ranch, he said. Samuel blinked. Freedom Ranch. The general nodded. It's a private sanctuary. For veterans. Built by veterans. It's where those who've been left behind can finally find peace. Samuel gripped the seat tightly, his heart thudding in his chest. Could this really be happening? They drove for nearly 2 hours, leaving the city behind. The scenery changed from crowded highways to wide open fields, rolling hills and tall oak trees swaying in the breeze. Finally they turned down a long dirt road and Samuel caught sight of it. Freedom Ranch. It was breathtaking. Rolling green pastures, white fences stretching for miles, log cabins nestled under massive trees. A huge American flag flapped proudly in the center of the compound. Groups of men and women in casual clothes, some missing limbs, some in wheelchairs, some just like Samuel, walked the grounds talking, laughing, living. Samuel stared, his mouth dry. It wasn't a hospital. It wasn't a shelter. It was a home. The SUV stopped in front of a large wooden building with a carved sign. Welcome home, brothers and sisters. Judge Reynolds stepped out from another car behind them, smiling warmly. General Briggs opened Samuel's door. You ready? He asked. Samuel's boots crunched on the gravel as he stepped out. The wind carried the scent of fresh grass and barbecue. A woman with short silver hair and a cane approached, smiling wide. You must be Sam, she said, reaching out to shake his hand. I'm Kathy. Navy 89. Welcome home. Samuel shook her hand awkwardly, not knowing what to say. More people gathered around, veterans of all shapes and sizes, faces lined with experience, hands extended in greeting, eyes filled with something Samuel hadn't seen in years, respect. He didn't realize tears were slipping down his cheeks until Kathy handed him a handkerchief. It's okay, brother, she said gently. You're safe now. The general clapped him on the back. Let's get you settled. They led him inside into a cozy lodge filled with soft couches, a roaring fireplace and the smell of fresh baked bread. Walls were covered in pictures, old photos of soldiers smiling, families reuniting, medals pinned proudly to chests. Samuel's heart ached at the sight. They showed him to a small cabin at the edge of the ranch, his cabin. Inside was a clean bed, a dresser, a desk by a window that looked out onto a field of wildflowers. A pair of boots, brand new, sat neatly at the foot of the bed, along with a fresh set of clothes and a small American flag folded with care. Samuel touched the flag reverently, his hands shaking. This is mine, he whispered. Yours? Kathy said, standing in the doorway. All yours. For the first time in decades, Samuel sat down on a real bed in a real room that belonged to him. And for the first time in even longer he slept. But just as peace seemed within his reach, just as the world started to feel safe again, a knock came at his door. He opened it to find Judge Reynolds standing there, her face serious. Samuel, she said, there's something you need to know. He frowned. What? She hesitated, then stepped inside. There's someone else looking for you, she said quietly. Someone. From your past. Samuel's blood ran cold. Who? Before Judge Reynolds could answer, another knock sounded. This time, when Samuel opened the door, he stared straight into the face of a man he thought was dead. The man grinned, a cruel wolfish grin. Long time no see, Private Carter, the stranger drawled. You didn't think you could run forever, did you? Samuel's body locked up with fear, his instincts screaming at him to run, but his legs refused to move. The man at the door had a face like a bad memory, rugged, scarred, eyes dark as coal. His hair was thinner now, and his leather jacket hung loosely over a wiry frame, but Samuel could never forget that crooked smirk. Judge Reynolds narrowed her eyes. Who are you? The man chuckled darkly and leaned against the doorframe, completely at ease as if this were just a casual visit. Name's Victor Hayes, he said. But Sammy boy here knows me better as his old commanding officer. Samuel felt like the air had been punched out of him. Victor Hayes, the man who had led Samuel's unit during the war. The man who had betrayed them. The man who had abandoned half their team, including Samuel himself, during that nightmare mission in Kandahar. Samuel clenched his fists. Memories flashed through his mind like lightning, gunfire, explosions, screams, and Victor Hayes disappearing into the smoke, leaving them to die. You're dead, Samuel whispered, voice shaking. I saw you fall. Victor grinned even wider. Oh, I fell all right. Right into a new identity. Right into a nice little life. Until the army found out about some creative decisions I made. Judge Reynolds looked between the two men, her frown deepening. What do you want from Samuel? Victor shrugged. Simple. I need him to forget what he knows. See, Sammy here could ruin everything if he talks. I've got plans. Big plans. And I can't have a washed-up veteran dragging my name through the mud. Samuel shook his head slowly. I don't even remember everything. Not clearly. But you remember enough, Victor said, stepping closer. Judge Reynolds immediately pulled out her phone, thumb hovering over the emergency button. Get off this property. Now. Victor's smile dropped. His eyes hardened. You think that phone's gonna save you? He sneered. You don't know who you're messing with, lady. Before anyone could blink, Victor reached into his jacket. Samuel reacted on pure instinct. With a speed that surprised even him, Samuel slammed the door hard against Victor's arm, pinning it. A gun clattered to the floor just outside. Judge Reynolds screamed. The ranch's security team, alerted by the commotion, came sprinting across the lawn. Victor roared with anger, yanking his arm free and shoving Samuel backward into a table. Samuel crashed hard, the wind knocked from his chest. Before Victor could retrieve the gun, 3 armed veterans tackled him to the ground. Get off me, he snarled, struggling wildly. General Briggs appeared out of nowhere, barking orders. Secure him, he shouted. Call the sheriff. Victor fought like a wild animal, but he was no match for the half-dozen trained soldiers now holding him down. In minutes, handcuffs were slapped onto his wrists, and he was dragged toward the ranch gate, cursing and threatening the whole way. You think you can hide here, Carter? Victor bellowed over his shoulder. You think you're safe? You're not. None of you are. Judge Reynolds rushed to Samuel's side, helping him sit up. Are you okay? She asked urgently. Samuel coughed, trying to catch his breath. I think so. General Briggs knelt beside him, his face grim. You know him? Samuel nodded weakly. He was my CO. He left us behind. He's the reason half my unit died. The general's jaw tightened. He's also been on the military's watch list for years, Briggs said. War profiteering. Selling secrets. Blackmail. We just never had enough to nail him. Samuel closed his eyes. It was too much. Too many ghosts. Too many buried memories clawing their way back into his mind. General Briggs placed a firm hand on his shoulder. Listen, Carter. You're not alone anymore. We've got you. Judge Reynolds nodded fiercely. Your family now. Samuel opened his eyes, blinking away the sting of tears. Family. It was a word he thought he'd never hear again. Just then Kathy, the kind woman who first greeted him at the ranch, appeared, holding a steaming mug of coffee. Come on, Sam, she said warmly. Let's get you cleaned up. You're safe here. Samuel accepted the mug with trembling hands and took a deep breath. But even as the danger seemed to fade, a heavy weight settled in his chest. Because Victor's words still echoed in his mind. You're not safe. And deep down, Samuel knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. That night, as the ranch settled into quietness and Samuel lay in his new bed staring at the ceiling, a strange unease kept him awake. Was Victor bluffing? Or was there something bigger coming? Something that not even Freedom Ranch could protect him from? Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window panes. Somewhere in the darkness, a dog barked anxiously. Samuel turned over, pulling the covers tighter around him. He was home now. But for how long? The next morning, the sun rose over Freedom Ranch, bathing the fields in golden light. Horses grazed lazily by the fences, and a group of veterans gathered near the main lodge, laughing over breakfast. On the surface, everything looked peaceful. But Samuel felt anything but peace. He sat on the front steps of his cabin, sipping lukewarm coffee, watching the horizon like a soldier still at war. The events of yesterday played on a loop in his mind. Victor's sneer, the cold glint in his eyes, his warning. You're not safe. Samuel's gut told him Victor wasn't bluffing. Judge Reynolds approached quietly, carrying a file folder tucked under one arm. You didn't sleep, she said, sitting down beside him. Samuel shrugged. Didn't feel right. Not after what he said. Judge Reynolds nodded grimly. That's why I'm here. She opened the file and pulled out a photo, grainy, black and white, showing a group of rough-looking men standing in front of a warehouse. Recognize anyone? She asked. Samuel leaned closer. His blood went cold. Victor was in the center of the photo, but he wasn't alone. He was flanked by half a dozen other men, all former soldiers, all discharged dishonorably for crimes ranging from smuggling to assault. This, Reynolds said, tapping the photo, is the network Victor's built over the years. Ex-military mercenaries. Dirty contracts. Private deals. Samuel swallowed hard. They're dangerous, she said. And loyal to him. Samuel stared at the picture, a sick feeling growing in his stomach. They'll come for me, he said quietly. Judge Reynolds didn't argue. Instead, she said, which is why we're not going to wait. Before Samuel could ask what she meant, the general's voice boomed from the lodge. Everyone to the main hall. Emergency meeting. Samuel and Judge Reynolds stood and hurried toward the lodge, where a dozen veterans had already gathered, men and women in jeans, boots, and ball caps, some with service dogs by their sides. General Briggs stood at the front, his arms crossed, a map of the ranch spread out on a table before him. He didn't waste time. "Freedom Ranch is a sanctuary," he said. "But it's also a fortress when it needs to be. And right now it needs to be." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Briggs pointed to the map. "We're fortifying all entrances. Patrols and shifts armed. No one comes in or out without clearance." Kathy raised her hand. "General, you think that Victor guy's really crazy enough to try something?" Briggs nodded grimly. "I know he is." He turned to Samuel. "This is your home now. And we protect our own." Samuel's throat tightened. He wasn't used to people fighting for him. He didn't know how to accept it. But he nodded. "I'll help," he said. "I'm not hiding." Briggs gave a small smile. "Didn't expect anything less, soldier." Preparations began immediately. Some veterans set up motion sensors along the property line. Others stacked sandbags and reinforced fences. It was like a base being rebuilt, but this time Samuel was fighting alongside family. By nightfall, Freedom Ranch looked ready for war. Still, an uneasy silence settled over the land as darkness swallowed the fields. Samuel sat inside his cabin, rifle across his knees, staring out the window. His service dog, Duke, lay at his feet, ears twitching at every little sound. Hours passed. Nothing. Just the soft chirp of crickets and the occasional howl of a distant coyote. But then, at exactly 2:17 a.m., Duke lifted his head and growled low in his throat. Samuel stiffened. He grabbed his rifle and moved to the window. At first he saw nothing. Just darkness. Then, movement. Shadows slipping between the trees. Men. Armed. Samuel's heart slammed against his ribs. He reached for the walkie-talkie clipped to his belt and whispered, "General, we've got incoming. East side. At least 6. Static crackled, then Briggs' voice came through. "Hold positions. Don't engage until they cross the boundary." Samuel crouched low, adrenaline flooding his veins. The men moved stealthily, dressed in black, faces covered with ski masks. They were pros. One of them carried a bolt cutter. Samuel's mind raced. They were trying to cut through the back fence, sneak in undetected. Duke growled again, low and deadly. Samuel stroked the dog's head, whispering, "Good boy. Stay ready." Through his scope, Samuel watched the lead intruder raise the bolt cutter to the fence. Just a few more seconds. Snap. The fence wire snapped. And the intruder slipped through. Samuel's finger tightened on the trigger, but he held. "Wait. Wait for the order." Through the walkie-talkie, General Briggs' voice growled, "Go." Samuel didn't hesitate. He fired once, not at a man but at a nearby floodlight, bathing the field in blinding light. The intruders cursed and scattered. From the tree line, other veterans emerged, men and women in tactical gear surrounding the invaders. It was an ambush. Chaos exploded across the field. Gunfire cracked. Shouts filled the air. Sirens wailed from somewhere beyond the trees, backup Briggs had secretly called earlier. Samuel sprinted out of his cabin, Duke at his side. He tackled one of the intruders trying to flee, wrestling the man to the ground with surprising strength. "Stay down." Samuel barked, pressing a knee into the man's back. Elsewhere, 2 more intruders were dragged toward the lodge in zip-tie restraints. The fight was short but fierce. And when it was over, Freedom Ranch still stood. Samuel panted heavily, adrenaline fading, muscles trembling. General Briggs approached, surveying the scene grimly. "Check them for IDs," he ordered. As they searched the intruders, something odd happened. One by one they found nothing. No wallets. No dog tags. No phones. It was like they had erased their identities. Judge Reynolds, who had joined the security effort, frowned deeply. "This was just a scouting party," she said. "Victor's real plan hasn't even started yet." Samuel wiped sweat from his brow, heart sinking. "Then what was this?" he asked. Judge Reynolds looked at the captured men grimly. "A message," she said. "Victor's letting us know he's coming." Samuel looked out into the darkness beyond the ranch gates, and for the first time since coming here he realized. This wasn't just about him anymore. Freedom Ranch was under siege. And the battle was only just beginning. The air at Freedom Ranch was thick with tension. Under the glow of emergency floodlights, veterans fortified the perimeter, stacking sandbags, stringing up new barbed wire, double-checking ammunition and radios. Every eye was sharp, every breath drawn tight. Samuel stood near the front gate, his heart pounding in his chest, a rifle slung across his back. Duke sat by his side, muscles tense, nose sniffing the night air. General Briggs moved down the line of defenders, barking sharp, confident orders. Stay sharp. Stay patient. We do not fire unless fired upon first. Samuel's mind spun. Victor wasn't coming alone. If the scouting party was that professional, the main force would be something worse. Mercenaries with no loyalty to anything but money and revenge. Judge Reynolds stood beside him now, wearing tactical gear that made her look like she belonged on a battlefield instead of a courtroom. You sure you're ready for this? She asked, tightening the strap on her bulletproof vest. Samuel nodded grimly. I've been ready my whole life. Lights flickered along the tree-line. Engines rumbled. Then, headlights. Dozens of them. Black SUVs. Dirt bikes. Trucks. Rolling toward the ranch gates like a thunderstorm of metal and hate. Samuel's grip tightened on his rifle. He recognized Victor immediately, standing in the bed of a pickup truck, wearing dark sunglasses even at night, arms spread wide like he was hosting a grand party. Victor raised a megaphone to his mouth. Evening, folks, he called, his voice oozing mockery. Sorry to drop by uninvited, but I'm here to collect what's mine. General Briggs stepped forward, his voice booming back through a loudspeaker. You've got no claim here. Turn around. Now. Victor laughed, the sound sharp and cold. Not how this works, General. You have something, someone I want. Send Carter out, and maybe the rest of you get to see tomorrow. A ripple of murmurs ran down the defense line. Samuel stepped forward without hesitation. I'll go, he said. Briggs grabbed his arm. You walk out there, you're dead. Samuel met his eyes, calm for the first time in years. If I don't, they'll come for all of you. Judge Reynolds stepped forward. We protect our own, remember? Samuel looked at the sea of veterans behind him, men and women who had already sacrificed so much. No, he said quietly. Not again. He turned, marching toward the gate. Samuel, stop. Judge Reynolds shouted. But Samuel didn't stop. He swung the gate open and stepped onto the dusty road, facing down the headlights and the horde of mercenaries. Victor grinned wide. There he is. The man of the hour. Samuel raised his hands calmly. You want me, Victor? I'm right here. No need to hurt anyone else. Victor's face twisted into a sneer. You always were the noble idiot. He raised his hand, the signal to attack. Suddenly, floodlights from hidden towers blazed on, bathing the battlefield in brilliant white. Dozens of Freedom Ranch defenders rose from trenches, foxholes, rooftops, armed and ready. They had been prepared. Victor froze, realizing too late that he had walked straight into a trap. General Briggs stepped onto the field behind Samuel, a bullhorn in hand. Victor Hayes, you and your men are surrounded. Drop your weapons. You are under citizen's arrest until sheriff's deputies and federal agents arrive. They're already on their way. Sirens howled in the distance, growing louder by the second. Victor's face turned red with fury. You think you can take me? He roared. He yanked a pistol from his belt and aimed it straight at Samuel. Everything slowed. Samuel barely flinched. A shot rang out. Samuel stumbled back in shock, but not from being hit. Victor dropped his pistol, a neat hole in his hand, blood pouring from his fingers. Judge Reynolds lowered her own smoking handgun from where she stood on the ranch porch. I warned you, she said coldly. Victor screamed in rage and pain, cradling his hand. Suddenly, his mercenaries, realizing the odds were stacked against them and hearing the sirens closing in, threw down their weapons. Dozens of them were tackled and zip-tied by ranch security and the veterans. Samuel stood in the middle of it all, breathing hard, adrenaline crashing out of his system. Victor was dragged to his knees by two burly veterans. You'll regret this. Victor spat. You think this changes anything? The system still hates you. They'll forget you again, Carter. Samuel stepped close, looking Victor dead in the eyes. Maybe, he said quietly. But not today. Sheriff's cruisers skidded into the ranch with flashing lights. Deputies and federal marshals spilled out, handcuffing the mercenaries and loading them into vans. General Briggs clapped Samuel on the back so hard he nearly stumbled. You did good, son, Briggs said gruffly. Judge Reynolds came over, smiling wide. You're not alone anymore, Samuel, she said. You never were. As dawn broke over Freedom Ranch, the veterans, battered, bruised, but victorious, gathered in front of the main lodge. An American flag was raised high into the morning sky. Samuel stood at attention, saluting alongside his brothers and sisters. He wasn't just a survivor anymore. He was home. For good. And as the flag flapped in the sunrise, Samuel Carter knew one thing for sure. He would never be forgotten again.